Hello and welcome to my book talk, everyone. My book is Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. It's a pretty new book. It was published in 2019, but Woodson is a pretty well-known young adult fiction author. She also has some other fiction books and a memoir that have contributed to making her a New York Times bestselling author. So throughout this presentation, we'll just look at Red at the Bone and how you can use that in your classroom. Red at the Bone takes place in Brooklyn in New York City, primarily in 2001, but it does contain flashbacks to earlier periods. The plot of the novel revolves around Melody, who is the child of an unplanned teenage pregnancy. This pregnancy affects two Black families that are from very different backgrounds. So throughout the novel, we see not only Melody's life, but also the lives of her parents, Iris and Aubrey, and her grandparents, as each of them kind of take over certain chapters and give some insight into how this event shaped all of their lives. Not only do they talk about this event and growing up in the family, but also how history has influenced their contemporary family. For audience age level, I would recommend this book to 11th and 12th graders. I wouldn't give it to students any younger, just because there's some mature themes primarily dealing with sex and a lot of language throughout the novel. This is a novel about family, so the best way to examine the characters or get to know the characters, I think, is through this family tree. At the bottom, we have our main character, Melody. She's kind of the focus of the novel. It's her birthday at the beginning that kind of spurs this conversation and exploration of emotion and beliefs and the decisions that were made in raising her and when her parents found out they were pregnant. So she's kind of the driving force, the driving character that all of this information is settled around. And then we have her parents, Iris and Aubrey. And this is where we get the interaction of two different families. Iris and Aubrey grew up very differently. Iris had her two parents, Sabe and Po Boy, who gave her a very stable life, both financially, academically. They do very well. Whereas Aubrey grew up with only his mother, very much a lower socioeconomic status, and faced challenges that Iris probably didn't have. And so we get some chapters that are from Iris's lens and Aubrey's lens, as well as their own parents, Melody's grandparents. Sabe, that's Iris's mother, gives some insight to the Tulsa race riots, and that's kind of where she's from, and that's the family history that she brings with her. Po Boy brings this strong father figure to the narrative where he's concerned for not only his daughter but also his granddaughter, and what's best for all of them. And then in Aubrey's mother, we have Kathy Marie, who is very passionate about education, not only for Aubrey, but she steps in as a tutor for Iris when Iris becomes pregnant and has to drop out of school. So this whole family tree, everyone works together. They're influenced by not only their place in the family, but their personal histories, their family histories, race history in the country, and all of those work together to form these interactions between the characters that lead to influencing each of their decisions over the course of the novel. There are a lot of different things that you could do while reading this novel to get the most out of it. I think the first one would be for students to create a playlist for the novel, choosing about 8 to 10 songs that go along with the themes found in the book. Music plays a really important part throughout the novel. and kind of links each character to their time period. So, for example, like Melody really loves Prince. She listens to that. That's what she plays at her cotillion. So, exploring the music in the novel and thinking about what other songs might go along with the story could be really interesting. The next learning experience would be for students to track the characters throughout the novel. There are a lot of characters, and each of them takes a couple chapters throughout the book. The way this is done, though, when you start a chapter, the reader doesn't always know which point of view it is from. But in reading the chapters, you learn a lot about each character. So keeping track of that on a sheet, kind of developing some characterization charts for each person could be very beneficial and also help to get an overall picture of what is happening. The last activity that you could do would be to examine a big decision that's made in the novel. So of course, um, once Iris becomes pregnant with Melody, there are a lot of decisions that are made not only by her and Aubrey, but also her parents and Aubrey's mother, where students could examine a decision that's made, maybe think of what another character would have done in that situation, or how they themselves would react if they were in that situation. As far as intertextuality with this novel, there are a lot of different avenues you could go in pairing resources with Red at the Bone. So there are a lot of references within the novel itself to the things that I have on the screen. The first thing I thought to pair with this book would be poetry from the Harlem Renaissance. Not only does Sabe talk about Paul Laurence Dunbar's poetry in the novel, but it is also set in New York City, near where the Harlem Renaissance took place, and follows this idea of history influencing contemporary lives and what it means to be like a Black family living and growing up in America, which is a lot of the different themes that the Harlem Renaissance explored. There is also a lot of opportunity to connect history and nonfiction resources to this book. So, especially the Tulsa race riots and 9/11 directly linked to the book as historical instances and experiences that took place in the characters' lives. So bringing those out, drawing those out, having students make connections to, you know, what was this historical circumstance could be very beneficial. And the last would be Sojourner Truth's speech, Ain't I a Woman? It is directly referenced in connection to the character of Iris. So reading this speech, watching it being performed, could help students better understand the character of Iris, since it's used directly in her chapters, and kind of evaluate, you know, what is this speech saying? How do I see the speech reflected in what Iris does? How could I translate that to the other women in the book? That could also be a very beneficial resource while teaching Red at the Bone. Through the lens of understanding by design, this novel has big ideas tied to family, personal history, and coming of age. It is very much a Bildungsroman for both Melody and her mother Iris. And essential questions that would go with this novel could be, how does family shape our values and beliefs? How can a person's actions impact their life and the lives around them? And how do our values, beliefs, and history affect who we are and our behavior?